Welcome to Talking Giants presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Pennick. We've got ourselves a jam-packed episode before we head down to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. The Giants hired a special teams coordinator, Michael Ghobrial. We're going to go through all the defensive coordinator candidates now and going to give our rankings on it too, and also a couple other things we got to clean up. Justin, how you doing?
Bobby Skinner, I'm good. Yeah, subscribe to JM Football. We'll give all the where you can watch stuff on Monday when we're actually going to be in Mobile, Alabama. But yeah, just subscribe to JM Football. Bobby Skinner actually just put out your first draft breakdown today, right? Who's the player?
Olu Fashanu, Penn State, love him. Graham Barton, who's going to be like my second round target for the Giants. Peyton Wilson coming out next week. I'm going to get the UCLA edge out the week after that. Watching Peyton Wilson from NC State, Justin, I noticed this guard from UConn who's also going to be the Senior Bowl, Christian Haynes. I'm like, ooh, I like this guy too. So draft breakdowns are going to be cranking out.
Love it. Subscribe to JM Football. Give those videos a bump because we have like a very big trivia based audience now. We want our Talking Giants draft film breakdown audience to get in on it too and promote those vids. So yeah, I'm good, man. Hired a special teams coordinator. Awesome. Excited for the media to ask him about the racetrack, which you put out that joke, which is great. We'll talk about these DC candidates. We'll get one hired, and we'll see what happens with Mike Kafka. There's still a lot of stuff up in the air with this Giants team, even though it feels like a very slow time of the year. Playoffs are happening.
Before we get into this episode, Justin, this episode was brought to you by some special people. Ethan Gray. I had a friend in high school named Zach Gray, and we messed with him a lot. Bike parts and shit. Jake Beatty, not Beetle, Beatty. He's got beady eyes. Dirty D. I just don't believe that that's his name. And Dirty then Jose Caraballo. Is Jose Mike Kafka's cousin? Are they both Puerto Rican?
Oh, come on now.
We figured out Mike Kafka is Puerto Rican.
Dirty
Justin,
Deeds.
who are these people?
Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. Who sings that? What band?
I don't know, but it's Dirty D.
AC/DC. Patreon.com/TalkinGiants. That's where you go to join the best community of Giants fans out there. Bobby Skinner will send you some stickers in the mail. Hang out with us while we record the shows live. Hang out with us in Alabama on Monday. And there's some shirt raffles. Patreon.com/TalkinGiants. Thanks to our patrons.
All right, Justin, the Giants hired a special teams coordinator, Michael Ghobrial, who's been with the Jets since 2021 as a special teams assistant under Brant Boyer. The Jets special teams have been very good in these 3 years from everyone who covers them, what they say. He made his way up the ranks, basically being a special teams and edge coach, right? He was at some smaller schools like Colorado, Mesa, and Tarleton State, where he was their coordinator for special teams and then their edge coach. Then went to Hawaii as the special teams coordinator, Washington State, and then joined the Jets. He had a connection with Jeff Ulbrich, who was the Jets defensive coordinator. So I'm assuming that's where that relationship started. So again, special teams are very hard to evaluate. But unless you cover that team on a day-to-day basis. But the Jets have been pretty good. I actually asked Zach Rosenblatt because, we watched Giants special teams practice and training camp, Justin, the last 2 years. And we're like, man, this is just lackadaisical. Like everything's a walkthrough. There's no intensity. And then we went to the Lions camp and they're treating special teams practice like it was life and death. I asked Zach Rosenblatt, who covers the Jets for The Athletic, about that, and he's like, no, they're pretty intense. Like, they're getting on guys, they're moving on. I found some clips of Michael Ghobrial talking about, hey, I'm hands-on, right? Like, I played football, I played edge at UCLA. I would, I will get in on a drill and show them how to do it. Obviously, you can't do that as much in the NFL.
Yeah, I actually read, I believe it was Dunleavy. Yeah, it was Dunleavy's article on Ghobrial, and one of the things that he talked about is that, Ghobrial's young. He's 35 years old. So, he says that I think he said this back in 2018 when he was still coaching in college. If I can't show what these guys to do, if I can't show them what to do, then it's going to be hard for me to teach them what to do. And also the most significant part of that Ryan Dunleavy article that I read, which had a lot of Jets sources, with the punter and some of the other former special teamers there. Something that Brandt does, and Brandt is the Brant Boyer, who's the current Jets special teams coordinator. Something that Brandt does a nice job of is giving Goby the opportunity to coach in front of the team and sometimes have the floor to grow. It's not going to be his first time doing a bunch of those speeches. He really has a good command in front of guys, and out on the field, he's very vocal. And these are the Jets special teams rankings the last 3 seasons with Ghobrial on the staff. Thanks to NYFG for getting this up. DVOA, former Football Outsiders, Aaron Schatz compiles it. So the special teams rankings of defense value over average, 2023, they were 5th. 2022, they were 21st. 2021, they were 2nd. And then Rick Gosselin's special teams rankings, which I guess Bill Belichick backs these. 2023, they were 3rd. 2022, they were 9th. And 2021, they were 13th. So it seems like he's a good leader. He's had the opportunity to lead before. The guys on the Jets were really happy that he got this job and he really got this opportunity. And the numbers and the special teams rankings are good and positive. Cool.
Yeah, let's just get these guys. Let's get 11 guys on the field. Let's getting guys working max effort and all that good stuff. I'm glad that they just interviewed people for the special teams coordinator job this time. I mean, they interviewed a bunch of guys, Justin. I think more than they even interviewed for the defensive coordinator position. And very early on a brand new head coaching, a brand new head coach's tenure, it's hard to criticize much, right? If you don't know too much of, it's their first time doing it, so you're learning about them. I think the first thing we learned that was negative about Brian Daboll is like the interview process for a special teams coordinator wasn't even an interview process. Okay, I got a live call on a Zach Rosenblatt. I want to see if he was trolling because you see how he tweeted that he's well respected.
Yeah, that was really odd.
Yeah. Hey,
what's up?
Hey, I lied. I don't have a scoop, but you're live on Talking Giants. Were you trolling when you said Michael Ghobrial's well respected because that's the joke with Thomas McGahee?
So as soon as I tweeted it, I realized that all the Giants fans were going to latch onto that. But I did not do it on purpose. I didn't do it to troll. I actually did.
Okay.
He is well liked in the building.
All right. Well,
I forgot about all that McGahee shit.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you. That's an interview. Go subscribe to The Athletic. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah.
See ya.
That was a great interview.
I texted him call me. I have a big scoop for you.
Oh,
so
come on.
I really let him down on that one.
Also, I mean, highly respected Bobby Skinner, beat reporter puts down what he's doing to call you for the scoop.
Well, I called him. He didn't answer, and then I said, "Call me. Have a big scoop for you."
Urgent. Oh, by the way, if anybody's Bill Belichick watching, I wanted to tell you this. Raheem Morris just got the Falcons head coaching job. Isn't that weird?
Weird. That is weird.
That kind of came out of left field.
Wow.
Not waiting for Ben Johnson.
On the podcast.
I know. People, it's old news tomorrow, but
remember Raheem Morris went from they just DB coach to head coach very quickly. When the Bucks fired John Gruden. Where's Bill Belichick? Bill
He's not
Belichick
go anywhere.
Needs to coach somewhere.
Anyway,
someone needs to fire their coach to bring in Bill Belichick.
Jets.
But anyways, the interview process was so lazy for the Giants last time in the special teams coordinator job. I mean, they just didn't. The article was written by Duggan where McGahee explained it, where it's halfway through the interview. He just stopped, Daboll stopped McGahee and was just like, hey, do you want the job? That's crazy to me. I'll read the quote, right? Because it was the article about how the coaching staff got brought together. McGahee, he was offered the special teams coordinator job with the Chargers and Panthers and declined an interview request from the Bears, but said, I wasn't really fired up about the other teams, to be honest with you, because I wanted to stay here. McGahee had no relationship with Daboll, who made an introductory phone call when he became a candidate for the Giants job. The night he was hired, Daboll called McGahee. The interview lasted 5 minutes. He was like, "Okay, you're in front of the room. First time you meet with the team, go." McGahee said. He stopped me halfway and through, and he was like, "Look, do you want to be here?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to be here. It's been great ever since." That's horrible. Right, even if you had a strong inclination that you wanted to hire McGahee, that's horrible to not go out and really interview other guys. It was, one of the And he ended up having to fire the guy 2 years later. So it ended up being a mistake. So I'm glad that they went through all of this. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about how great of a special teams coordinator Michael Ghobrial is. We'll see once he gets his first crack at it this year if there's any advantages through the Giants. But I am hopeful.
Yeah, dude, it was such a disaster this year where the blocked field goal leads to the Andrew Thomas injury, which leads to really bad offensive football. I mean, if there's one guy going down that most correlates to good offense and bad offense, it's Andrew Thomas and left tackle. And if it's good Daniel Jones and bad Daniel Jones, it's Andrew Thomas. So that was devastating. The Graham Gano situation was brutal. Jamie Gillian at one point was, punting with both legs hurt, and he couldn't. It was bad. Multiple situations this year, probably more than I'm forgetting, where special teams was bad. You couldn't find anybody return. Couldn't find a returner.
That's Joe Shane's fault.
I know. Yeah, I know, man. But it was just a disaster. It was a disaster all year long.
Yeah, they were just never an advantage. Where other special teams coordinators look for advantages to have. Thomas McGahee, he basically never had that happen for the Giants.
I don't even want an advantage. I just don't want it to be a negative. That's the ask.
So let's get into these defensive coordinator candidates, Justin. Before that, Brandon Brown. Again, we're recording this. He very well may get the Chargers job, right? He interviewed the same day that Jim Harbaugh was hired. That very much could happen. Now, here's the thing. We don't know, does everything that we've seen from Brandon Brown seem good? Yeah. But we also don't know what decisions he's really influencing. He seems to have good process about him. But, through 2 drafts right now, the Giants just haven't had, any guy who's popped out as stellar. Are you the same mindset where, because of this new rule about the comp picks for hiring a minority, right? Including Mike Kafka, because his grandparents are Puerto Rican, where I almost want him to get the job because I think the assistant GM job is less valuable. An unproven assistant GM is less valuable than 2 third-round picks.
Yeah, I agree. And Joe Shane's been working around the league long enough. And also, I almost feel like we have an assistant GM. Who's that guy that was with the Dolphins? He was the GM of the Dolphins when Shane was there.
Dennis Hickey.
I feel like Dennis Hickey would be promoted to assistant GM. Or I don't even know if do you need to have an assistant GM? Anyway.
They wouldn't be able to hire one until after the draft because it was actually Howie Roseman cried that the Brandon Brown got hired and knew their draft board and stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm with you, man. And especially this year's draft, if they do want to trade up, getting as much ammo as possible. I understand they're comp picks at the end of the 3rd round, so they're not as valuable as the top 5 picks that you have at the beginning of the 3rd round like the Giants do. Getting as much ammo as possible is a very, very good thing if they want to go after a quarterback, but also getting a 3rd-round pick, multiple 3rd-round picks, is a great thing for the Giants in general because it's another opportunity to get to hit at a player.
Justin, what pick do you think Fred Warner was drafted with? He's drafted 70th, so he wasn't a comp pick. But basically, 3rd-round picks can turn into some good players. Yeah. So getting that more ammo. So again, I don't, right, Brandon Brown could be the worst assistant GM in the NFL or the best assistant GM in the NFL. We don't know from the outside looking in. Obviously, I think Shane wants to keep him and values him. But from the outside looking in, I don't have any huge takeaway on oh no, we can't lose Brandon Brown. But what I do look at is hey, I like having 2 third-round picks. So it's kind of crazy how that rule has changed the way you look at it. Where it's I'd be willing to part with a valuable member. Now, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, that's a different story, right? I don't value 2 third-round picks over a good coordinator. But an assistant GM, the GM at the end of the day is the one making the decisions.
Yeah.
And the assistant GM is being molded in the GM's vision for the most part. So I feel like that's a very replaceable position unless that guy just has a hell of an eye for talent. And again, through 2 drafts, we have some pieces that we like and can grow into stars, but nobody who's downright certified that right now. and especially not from day 3, which, round 1, obviously the assistant GM is having in those conversations, but there's nothing. The GM is the main decider of round 1. I don't think he's being, his opinion is being pushed one way or the other very much by more than anyone besides Brian Dable.
I can imagine you're mentioning through 2 drafts. I can imagine Brandon Brown didn't have really any much of a, not say input. The 2022 draft is so tough to analyze because Shane already had the first 4 rounds done, and you still had, some old people from the old regime in there, whereas I really view last year's draft class as like, all right, even though 2022's matters because you have 2 top 10 picks, right? But 2023, I really view it as the first class with full collaboration with Shane's vision, Shane's people, Shane and Dable's process, right? That's the first draft class that I really view it with, and I really like last year's draft class. So that is the one positive that I would say, like with Brandon Brown in there, especially hearing how he talked about the process of drafting Deonte Banks. There were those clips circulating this past spring, so it seems like Brandon Brown's got it together, but I do agree with you that it seems like it's a position that's easily somewhat replaceable because it's the GM that's still making those decisions and it's the GM's vision on things. So
yeah, and like you said, I love last year's draft class all the way down to Javarius Owens, right? Like we like, basically the one pick we weren't big fans of was Jordan Riley because the film sucked, and they came out and like, yeah, his film sucked, but he's someone we want to work with.
Yeah,
and
proved that they should.
Yeah. So yeah, I like last year's draft class a lot, but my point just being like, there hasn't been this proven track record of just great talent evaluation yet. We'll see as these guys develop. Obviously, it's very early on in this regime. All right, Justin, let's get into these defensive coordinator candidates. This is the real meat and potatoes of this episode. But first, let's talk to us about something.
I'll talk to you about something. Today's episode that's sponsored by SeatGeek. They're a bunch of geeks about some damn seats. And if you don't know what SeatGeek is, they're a ticketing app that makes buying tickets super simple, plus they're geeks about seats. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek, they're the number 1 rated ticketing app in the world. There's no doubt they're undisputed because they have 70,000 events every single day on the app, including sports, concerts, festivals, and so much more. I was recently looking at Kelly Clarkson tickets when she's going to be in Atlantic City this summer. Also, Avril Lavigne is going to be in PNC Bank this summer, and I would like to go see her too. It's the summer of blonde older women. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps, and we've got the hookup. Use code GIANTS for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code GIANTS. Click the link in the description to download the app. Bobby Skinner, you and everyone else and your mother will be glad you did. Why'd you have to bring your mother into this?
Let's get into these defensive coordinator candidates. So once the Giants hire someone, we'll get a lot deeper into it. We'll talk with people who cover that team and stuff. But wanted to go through some research, and I did ask some people some stuff that covered these guys. Before we get into it, I just want to give my rankings of the guys, right? So here would be my order of candidates. Number 1 would be Dennard Wilson, the Ravens DB coach. We talked about that on Tuesday. Number 2 would be the new guy, Bills linebacker coach Bobby Babich. So, but 3 and 4, I'm having a tough decision between Jerome Henderson and Shane Bowen. I actually think Shane Bowen's a little underrated, right? Like the Titans defense hasn't been great during his time, but I feel like with better talent, he would do well. And he's always been great stopping the run. He likes to play man coverage. And they've just been a team that's been hurt and injured. And when they were at their best, they were, 5th in points per game in 2021 with him as the defensive coordinator. But between him and Jerome Henderson, I would say I would just go ahead. I'll go with the unproven guy in Jerome Henderson 3, Shane Bowen 4, Anthony Campanile, the linebacker coach from the Dolphins 5, and then Chargers defense coordinator Derrick Ansley 6.
Yeah, I'm with you for the most part there. I would swap Bowen and Henderson. Simply just give Bowen the nod over, like I give him the nod because he's called plays before. I kind of have a 1A 1B situation with Wilson and Babich. I kind of have a 1A 1B situation happening right now. And we'll talk about each one. Who do you want to start with?
Let's start with Dennard Wilson, the Ravens DB coach. Obviously, comes from that Mike McDonald defense this past year that was really good. But he was with the Eagles before as their defensive backs coach. We talked about these stats on Tuesday. Last year with the Ravens, this year with the Ravens, first in yards per attempt, second in passes defended, third in interceptions. And 2022 with the Eagles, third in yards per attempt, fourth in passes defended, fourth in interceptions. And we saw the Eagles drop significantly after losing Steichen and him. From interceptions, went from 4th to 26. Passes defended, 4th to 19th. Yards per attempt, 3rd to 15th. And both the he's worked in different types of defenses, right? Like a 4-3 and a 3-4. Both past defenses have been well structured and disciplined. And just what the Ravens do defensively, that is who I want to bring over, right? Does that mean that Dennard Wilson is going to be a carbon copy of Mike McDonald? Absolutely not. But what they do, the fact that the Giants personnel has been shaped around Wink Martindale, who comes from that Ravens and who was, worked with, Mike McDonald in the past. I want that. I want what the Ravens do defensively over to the Giants, and that's what Dennard Wilson represents. And he has a proven track record of doing well with the Eagles too, where Darius Slay even said we should have promoted him.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about Wilson a lot as like our favorite candidate so far, during that time. You talk about the Ravens mentality. It's like we don't even know what kind of scheme or mentality that he would bring because he was with the Eagles, 2 years ago, and now the Ravens this past year. So, part of me would like to say, hey, you learn some things here, you learned some things in Baltimore. Let's bring it to New York and call a good defense here. Former player. I think the players on that defense would maybe rally around that. It's like, hey, this guy's been in the locker room, this guy's been in our shoes. Especially a Giants secondary, which I would say that's the unit that is the least proven right now, especially that DB room, out of all the units on the defense. So, yeah, just based on his track record, based on, if he was just with the Eagles or just with the Ravens doing this the last couple years, it'd be like, I don't know, maybe. But the fact that he was with the Eagles, you saw how great, he had that secondary, Darius Slay and James Bradbury, playing great football last year. Great football. And then he leaves, goes to Baltimore. That secondary is playing absolutely great, fantastic football, especially with those safeties. They have 3 really good safeties running around. And you saw how the Eagles regressed specifically in their secondary. So I would say it's like a positive for him that the Eagles regressed so much kind of without him. And of course, Darius Slay saying that, hey, he should have got the job. So I'm for Dennard Wilson if he's not like that. I am excited if he is the next defense coordinator for the Giants. Obviously not knowing what he runs, but I am really excited.
Obviously, the Ravens have really good players, right? Like, they have one of the best linebackers in the game in Roquan Smith, right? All pro player. They've been able to get a lot of pressure this year from their guys. Kyle Hamilton on the back end. But the way that they, game plan on a week-to-week basis and shutting down what you like to do and trying to bait quarterbacks into mistakes and interceptions, right? Using 3 safeties when they need to do it is just, I desire that type of defense, more so than a lot of other defenses in the NFL. And I think he'll play man when he needs to play man. And I just want that type of, willingness to work on a week. They just held CJ Stroud to 3 points.
Crazy.
Right? CJ Stroud has went head-to-head with some of the best defenses in the NFL this year, and they held him to 3 points in a playoff game. Right? That's unreal type of stuff.
And the Ravens
Obviously,
are just
Mike
kicking
McDonald,
the shit out of everybody, too.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a team above 500. Go ahead.
Now, obviously, Mike McDonald is the defensive coordinator, but I want to pull from that.
Yeah. Here's what I will kind of point to, and we're going to examine this further if Wilson's hired. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten more interviews. He did get interviewed today for the Titans D coordinator spot, so I believe it's the Giants and the Titans that have requested an interview to Dennard Wilson. But if you look at the safety depth chart on the Ravens, it's Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams. Kyle Hamilton listed as a strong safety, Marcus Williams listed as a free safety. But it's Geno Stone, who has 7 interceptions this year. 7 interceptions. Well, at one point, Dalton Feely and I do all JM, we did 4 all pro team videos on the JM football channel this year. Geno Stone at one point was having on pace to have an all pro year, and to have this safety who's third on your depth chart, who's the third string safety kind of coming off the bench, have 7 interceptions this year. That's really awesome, cool stuff. And what round was Geno? Geno Stone was a 7th round draft pick in the 2020 NFL draft, and he's more than serviceable. Awesome. 7 interceptions this year in his 4th year. So that's the kind of stuff, like, imagine if Giants fans would freak out if we took a safety, if Javarius Owens has in his 3rd or 4th year 7 interceptions, like we'd be singing the praises of the secondary DB coach. So let's do it. Hey, if he's hired, do it here.
Also having the personnel and using the safeties interchangeably, moving them all over the piece. And I think that's, if there's one thing that I've noticed as a trend, Justin, out of all these guys similar, is that willingness to like use the safeties in an interchangeable type of way. Mm-hmm. Now, the worry is, hey, Mike McDonald could get a head coaching job, and then, Dennard Wilson could be promoted. But here's the thing, Justin. Who's left for Mike McDonald to take the head coaching job? The Seahawks? I don't think they even have a second interview with him, right? Or an interview at all. Right? The Panthers hired a coach. Mm-hmm. The Falcons just hired a coach, like you said. The Bears aren't firing their coach. The Commanders, right? I don't know if they're what they're going to do. Like, there's, Raiders hired Antonio Pierce, Chargers Jim Harbaugh. There's really no jobs there. Titans got their guy. Like, there's
I could see Dennard Wilson just going to another Harbaugh with Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, that could very well happen. Obviously, McDonald came from Michigan too, with the as the defensive coordinator there.
Yeah,
so
that's the jump that I could see. But got to get an interview first, and we'll see when the Super Bowl ends. I don't think Wilson's gonna. I think he's gonna be more. I'm surprised he hasn't been more highly desired, but I don't think he's gonna come here. I just have that feeling. I think there's connections and dots that go elsewhere.
Well, and here's the other thing is, like you said, like teams haven't. Teams are just now hiring their head coaches, right? So defensive coordinator interviews are opening up. The Rams just got an opening up,
right.
As for defensive coordinator. So those spots are up there. All right, next on this list, Justin, Bobby Babich. Let's get another Bills coach named Bobby. How about that? He's their linebacker coach. He's been their linebacker coach for the last 2 years, but before that was their safety coach from 2018 to 2021. We know a lot about the Bills defense from, looking at Leslie Frazier as a candidate and just having crossover with them and having friends who cover the Bills very well with Cover One. They love Babich, right? They really like this guy, and he's gotten them, he's had some good players to coach, but he sure as hell has gotten the most out of them, right? Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, they were all pros underneath him with him. Matt Milano was a first-team all-pro under him, right? Terrell Edmonds got paid. Terrell Bernard, right, stepped into that role this year and really stepped up and was a good player. There's some things I don't love about the way the Bills play defense, but Bobby Babich has gotten the most out of his position groups as a coach, and the ability to move from safeties to linebackers makes me really excited about his just ability to coach, to move from position to position like that on the same team and have the production he's had with the positions.
And even before that, he was an assistant defensive backs coach in 2017 with the Bills, assistant defensive backs and safeties with the Browns, assistant defensive backs with the Panthers. He was the secondary and defensive pass game coordinator with, hey, if you even want to go to Florida International, FIU, right, back in 2016. This is why I put Babich up there with 1A, 1B with Wilson, because Wilson has kind of jumped around. So it's one of those things of, is it the situation that he's in, or is it the coach? Babich has helped form these guys up in multiple spots with the safeties, with the linebackers, and that's what kind of impresses me the most. And despite losing Edmonds in free agency, I think the Bills had some linebackers injuries this year. That defense stayed afloat, and particularly those linebackers stayed afloat this year when I think they even suffered some injuries. So I'm I would be, again, excited if Babich comes in. You don't know what kind of defense he runs, but the fact that he has the multi-year formation of these players on his resume, that's the thing that I'm excited about, and that's the thing that I get really excited about. Drafting young players for this defense, Babich getting his hands on those guys.
Assuming he would run a similar defense to the one that he's been in for the last 7 years, Justin,
That's fair.
he would represent the biggest change of identity for this defense, right? One, it's a 4-3 defense. They also live, like the Bills just don't get out of nickel, right? Like you would have to get a run defending nickel defender, which I think should be a priority for the Giants anyways. Now, maybe he could change a little bit if he doesn't have Taron Johnson and has Cordell Flott as a starting nickel corner going into the season. But like they just live out of nickel, and they do really well with it too against the run and stuff. I think they need to get out of it a little more in the red zone, but that's what they live out of, right? And it's a 4-3 defense. They also, they just run more too high defenses than most teams, but they're diverse in it. They don't blitz, right? They just don't like the blitz, right? When they do blitz, if they send one, they want to drop run, right? So they want to run simulated pressure so that they are dropping guys back in coverage, right? Their priority is to stop the pass. They are number one in stopping and EPA per play these past 6 years in passing. They're number 15 in rushing, even though they've had the guys to stop the run, right? It hasn't been a personnel issue. So it would be the most significant change of philosophy in this defense would be Bobby Babich. But I would be willing to take that on because the Bills' defenses have just been really good throughout the years. And now they've been very talented too, but they haven't been like overly talented like, the Eagles a couple years ago or,
Right.
even like the Ravens this year, right? And they've dealt with injury issues, right? Those safeties have been gotten injured a good amount the last few years. Matt Milano, like you mentioned before, he got injured, at week 5 or whatever it was and was out for the season. And Bernard was able to step in. Dorian Williams was able to, play meaningful snaps for them and grow. So, Bobby Babich, his resume I really like. The Cover 1 guys really like him, which their stamp of approval means a lot to me. I would be excited about this. And it would represent obviously some crossover with Brian Daboll, which I would rather have than not have.
Right. Like I'm not looking at this, if Babich is hired, I'm not looking at it as a negative versus Daboll. Oh, a person that he worked with in Buffalo, did people want, I'm not looking at it like anything negative towards Daboll. Like this guy's resume, I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I would rather, now I wouldn't want to be a deciding factor in the job, but I would rather have someone that worked with Daboll because of what happened this year and the fact that I like Brian Daboll and I want Brian Daboll to be the Giants head coach. So I really don't want there to be any bullshit that leaks into dysfunction within the organization, right? I want guys that are on the same page and are okay working with each other. All right, Justin, next on this list, let's go Jerome Henderson, right? Was hired, we know him, hired under Joe Judge and Patrick Graham from the Falcons, was one of the few coaches that was not a Joe Judge relationship guy, right? There was only 3 guys hired that year that weren't Joe Judge relationship guys. It was Jason Garrett and Mark Colombo. Mark Colombo was Jason Garrett's guy. And Jerome Henderson, who did coach under Jason Garrett in Dallas, but how much impact was like Jason Garrett having on the DB coach hiring in 2020? I don't know, but if there's one thing, Garrett did well, then it was, telling the Giants to draft Andrew Thomas and that. He's a primarily single high, like they've been in primarily single high cover 3, cover 1 defenses, whether that was with the Falcons as their passing game coordinator or, Patrick Graham. And then obviously with Wink Martindale, right? Patrick Graham had a little bit of an adjustment where he went to some more too high coverages in his second year, but still cover 3 was their main coverage. They rotated from those 2 highs. We really like him, Justin. He's really known how to help out his cornerback twos, right? Isaac Yiadom and Fabian Moreau. Those are both guys who started and were not unplayable guys who didn't even get to spend all of camp with the team. Isaac Yiadom was traded for, and Fabian Moreau was signed to the practice squad after cutdown day from the Texans, who were the worst team in the NFL, cut him that year. Adoree Jackson at cornerback 2 had a career year under him, right? Deonte Banks has looked good in that role. We've seen improvement from him. Like, we like how he's had some gradual improvement as a rookie. James Bradbury's emergence there was huge. And I think something that gets underrated and not talked about as much with Henderson is the safety position, right? utilizing different safeties has been a lesser talked about accomplishment. Really helped groom McKinney to make huge improvements within the 2021 season. The beginning of 2021, McKinney was not good at safety, and then by the end of the year, he was thriving. And, has been extremely versatile with those guys, right? Had Logan Ryan come in mid-camp, never played safety in the NFL, he was a good safety that year. Jabril Peppers was a playmaker. Jabril Pepper, with some of the limitations he has, was a top 5 in all safety categories for, passes defended, interceptions, tackles for a loss. Jason Pinnock went from a Jets cut to a solid player. Julian Love got a contract, moving him all over the place. And it's just that ability to move guys, move them around, even though we didn't agree with the Adoree Jackson to nickel, being able to just move guys and having them adjust. He's been in different defensive systems, most of which are, again, single high, aggressive, which I like. Jerome Henderson, man, I would be very happy for him to get his chance in the NFL as a defensive coordinator because I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I think he's earned it too. I mean, this is the only guy, right? Now that McGahee's gone, the only guy that's left from the Joe Judge era of coaches. And he's the only one that's lasted this long and the only position coach that made it. And, it's funny how, you criticize the interview process for special teams coordinator. Well, if the interview process for DB coach was, hey, you're good at forming guys, you want the job? Yeah. I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm cool with that for Jerome Henderson from
and
Joe
it was
Judge
actually more than that. They went out to dinner. They actually had a real interview process, right. And they made him part of the hiring process for defensive coordinator. Obviously, the Giants thought they were going to keep Patrick Graham at first.
But I'm glad you touched on this about the safeties, and I think you mentioned cover 1, cover 3, but I think Patrick Graham's defense is very, very different from Wink Martindale's, right? I think very, very different.
Well, Wink Martindale's defense is different from everyone's, but
right.
The go-to coverages, Wink runs cover 1 and blitzes a ton, right? But the structure is similar, where it's single high. And cover 3 is, if there was anything that was man coverage in zone, it's cover 3.
Yeah, so I think it's impressive that Henderson went from one D coordinator to the next, and it almost felt like he didn't necessarily miss a beat and didn't have any favors last year with CB2 adding Fabian Moreau at the last minute, and secondary looked more than fine. Didn't allow all those explosive plays and things like that. So I'm for, hey, if they decide that Jerome Henderson's the one, I'm going to be really interested to see what kind of defense he runs. Is it a blend of Wink? Is it more towards the Patrick Graham style? I'll be really interested to see what they want to do.
He coached under Dan Quinn too, who we know is aggressive and cover 1. So there's a lot of different defenses he's been under. I don't think any of the Wink bad blood spilled over to Jerome Henderson because they are interviewing him. Right. For the defensive coordinator job, so there should be good there too. So the cornerback development has been good. All right, next on this list, Titans defensive coordinator Shane Bowen. I feel like the first reaction to this was negative, right? Because Titans fans don't love him. Diving into it, I don't look at Shane Bowen as some innovator as the defensive coordinator job, but I think he's probably league average, above average, right? He's been their defensive coordinator since 2021. He was their outside linebacker coach before that, coming with from the Texans with Vrabel, was even at Ohio State with Vrabel for a little bit. Runs a 3-4 defense. Titans defense this last 3 years has been 20th in EPA per play, and points going from most recent to 2021, 16th, 13th, and 5th, so have gotten worse. Passing 24th, 27th, and 17th, which is the most alarming. But rushing, they've been great. 4th, 1st, and 4th. They stopped the damn run. Likes to play press man, but didn't always have the guys to do it. Not very creative in his blitzing packages, right? He's bottom of the league usually in blitz rate and pressure rate consistently. Single high safety guy, likes to stack the box. One of the things I like about him is he likes to use the safeties interchangeably. I just don't think he's had a ton of talent to work with in Tennessee outside of 2021, which again, they were a top 5 defense that year. Their cornerback development hasn't been very, good, whether it's Roger McCreary or Caleb Farley. Both those guys have dealt with injuries. I just don't think they've been, flush with talent, but through all of that, they've been able to stop the run and never been bottom in the half in points per game in his time there.
I have a prediction. Bowen is going to be the next defense coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. And I say this simply because Bowen got his first full-time role back in 2018 when he was named the Titans outside linebacker coach. And Matt LaFleur was the offense coordinator. That's the tie. That's why.
Titans fans don't like Shane Bowen. So Shane Bowen would probably be a pretty frustrating coach, right? Where if he's got good personnel, he's probably a good coordinator. And if it's bad, it's like he's not really making anyone look better, right? But I feel like, Wink's defenses were not ranked anywhere near as good the last 2 years as the Titans have been.
Right.
Right? And the Titans have Jeff Simmons, right? Who was
right.
They've got some good players. What's the edge player? He missed last year, but he played. Harold Landry's a good player, but their cornerbacks have been banged up. They got a decent safety group. Like, they haven't been filled with talent. Like, they have one great player in Jeff Simmons, and then Harold Landry's a good player, but again, coming off of a torn ACL, didn't missed the whole year. They just haven't been. Again, I don't think they're over that talented. So there was negative reaction to Shane Bowen. I'm not going to be excited about him as a defensive coordinator, but I will be. I don't think it's the worst hire either.
No, I mean, if anything, it'll be the easiest hire for us to actually go and watch. My main thing is what is his defense trying to accomplish? Like, what's his MO? Do you know that yet? I mean, we played in week 1 last year.
I mean, it's just kind of stop the run, right? I mean, they've been great at stopping the run. They're looking to stop the run. Now, I know the Giants actually ran the ball well on them last year, but that was the outlier for them. They are a stop the run type of defense, right? And again, when I say first and fourth, that's not counting stats. That's yards per carry type numbers. Like, they've been great at stopping the run, but they have sacrificed in coverage because of that, and they haven't had the dogs to go out there. But if the Giants, if Deonte Banks develops into a cornerback 1, right, like a really good cornerback 1, and the Giants were to go and sign another good corner or whatever, then I feel like Shane Bowen with Xavier McKinney there, with whatever other player you have at safety, I feel like he's Bobby Okereke a linebacker, and and Dex up front. I feel like you're kind of cooking there. Even though he's an outside linebacker coach, I don't trust him to develop Kayvon and get the most out of Kayvon and fill in the blank for edge rushers, because they've never been able to get pressure outside of Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee. Like, they've been bottom of the league in pressure rate most of those years.
Yeah, the part of the priority is to stop.
Good players there too.
The priority is to stop the run, and then they've been a little susceptible in the past. That's the thing that scares me, because I'd much rather be the Buffalo Bills and be top 5 consistently in pass defense and be 15th or average in stopping the run than the other way around. In today's NFL, that's just what I would rather be. So,
right, but they've also they have not been a bottom half points per game defense in the NFL during that time. They just haven't been great on a per play basis, but they've been able to figure it out.
You got to think about this too. They play in a really bad division in the AFC South too. So,
right. Next on this list, Dolphins linebacker coach Anthony Campanile. This guy, as New Jersey as it gets, is as talented as it gets. And I'll let you talk about that a little more. He's been the Dolphins linebacker coach since 2020. 3 of those years under Josh Boyer and 1 under Fangio. Was the Michigan linebacker coach in 2019 under Harbaugh after some years at Boston College and Rutgers in high school. Boyer comes from the Patriots 3-4 single high cover 3 defenses, right? And then with Brian Flores and Josh Boyer, they have blitzed the piss out of teams, right? And the 3 years with Josh Boyer as a defensive coordinator, they've been 3rd, 2nd, and 2nd in blitz rates in the NFL. And that includes Wink Martindale being in there all those years. With Fangio, they didn't blitz very much, and now he's gone. This is a hard one to figure out with Anthony Campanile without just kind of looking at what Josh Boyer did as a defense, because there has not been much talent at linebacker for the Dolphins for him to work with. outside of like Channing Tindall was drafted in the 3rd round out of Georgia. He has not developed. But David Long Jr. played pretty well for them on a 1-year deal this year, who I liked coming from the Titans. But they have not had good linebackers and not really any young guys to mold either. Like their only stack linebacker drafted in this time is Channing Tindall, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like the Dolphins got to figure out drafting.
All right, you ready for the family ties? So we'll start off with the young kids. Dominic Campanile is currently the starting quarterback for Bergen Catholic. Michael Campanile is currently a wide receiver for Bergen Catholic in New Jersey. Then you have Campanile's in New Jersey. Football's family business. Mike's 4 sons. So Mike Campanile is the father. Vito, Nunzino, Anthony, and Nicky coach at 3 different levels of the sport. Vito, the oldest, is the head coach at Bergen Catholic. I believe he's still there now. Nunzio oversees tight ends at Rutgers University. I think he's still at Rutgers. Anthony coaches linebackers for the Miami Dolphins, and Nicky is the head coach of DePaul Catholic. The Campaniles run New Jersey.
Yeah,
that's the background.
There's a Hard Knocks speech that he has where it's just like, this guy is like, they're laughing because it's like, this guy's a lunatic. I don't have anything against Campanile, but there's just really nothing on his resume that screams this guy should be a defensive coordinator. Unless, hey, he's going to run the Brian Flores blitz the piss out of your defense. He's got experience coaching in it, and he really wants to do it, and that's what you want to... Like, if there's anything that's going to be as close to Wink Martindale, it would be coming from that Josh Boyer defense, even though there is some differences in what they do.
Yeah, there's no... How old is he? He's 41.
Yeah, he's a young guy. I mean, he grew up, high school coaching, obviously in New Jersey. Then went to Rutgers, Boston College, Michigan, and then into the Dolphins with Josh Boyer. All right, last on this list, Chargers defensive coordinator Derrick Ansley was their defensive coordinator this past year, was their DB coach the 2 years before that under Staley. Another Titans defensive coordinator, was their defensive coordinator and DB coach from 2019 to 2020. Been a 3-4 defense with both those teams. The Titans were 23rd in EPA per play in those years with him. In points, they were 24th and 12th. Passing, 22nd and 19th. Rushing at 18th and 17th. Been a middle-of-the-pack blitz rate, but bottom in pressure rate with the Titans. This past year with the Chargers, they were 24th in points per game, 28th in passing, 10th in rushing. I mean, the pass defenses were bottom half with him as a DB coach. They run more man coverage and blitz more than you would think when you think of like Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio influence type defense. But they have been a bad defense, right? Now, he did take over play. Like Staley called the plays, right? So you can't judge Ansley too much on that. And when he did call the plays the last 3 games after Staley was fired, they gave up 17.6 points per game compared to the 24.6 with Staley. They faced Josh Allen, Jarrett Stidham, and Blaine Gabbert in those 3 games. So, they held Josh Allen to 24 and then 13 and 12 for Stidham and Gabbert, which is good for those teams. But I just don't want anything from that Chargers defense.
No,
is basically what it is.
Yes.
Right? Like I would rather go with Brandon Staley as the defensive coordinator, who at least had that success with the Rams and all that. But like I don't want to bring anything over from the Chargers defense.
No, a team that runs too high that even had trouble stopping the pass, and no, I'm not on board for that.
Right, and they've had like Khalil Mack. Like Khalil Mack ended up having a good year, but like started
huge
off
resurgence
slow.
here.
Yeah. So there's tell me why I should want Derrick Ansley, right? Like even Campanile, I could talk about, hey, the blitzes and all that stuff. I like that. Shane Bowen, I could talk about how he stops the run and has been top half in the NFL in points per game as a defensive coordinator. Jerome Henderson, I could tell you what he does. Bobby Babich, his resume, and Dennard Wilson. Like with Derrick Ansley, I just don't see it. So, but you could have said the same things about Patrick Graham when he was hired from the Dolphins at the same time too. Right, where it didn't call the plays, the second half, but you watch film. Like I kind of like some of the stuff they do, and he can grow.
But at least he was coming from Miami.
You saw the Titans' defense get better under Shane Bowen, and Vrabel felt the need to move off of Ansley for Bowen. So there's nothing there that pops out. All right, Justin, do you got anything else on these guys?
No, it basically feels like the first 4 guys that we talked about, it's going to be one of those 4, right? And hopefully it comes down to Babich or it comes down to Dennard Wilson. But hey, even if Bowen gets it, then hey, we have a lot of film on the Tennessee Titans. And if Jerome Henderson gets it, then cool. We hired a guy in-house, and there's at least a little bit of continuity there, and then we'll spend the next however many months figuring out what kind of defense Jerome Henderson's going to run.
Yeah, so my prediction would be Bobby Babich, right? You don't hear his name being floated around the league. There's connection there. That would be my prediction. I think Dennard Wilson will probably get a better job offer than the Giants right now.
Yeah. Do you think Jerome Henderson would get a little PO'd and maybe want to leave? So that would be the next cookie to crumble is if Babich comes in here or whatever next defensive coordinator comes in here, what kind of staff do they want to hire? Who are the position coaches that they want to hire and things like that? So that'll be a cookie to crumble that we'll watch out for too.
Yeah. Eggs, I think the linebacker coach worked with him in Buffalo. And yeah, that would be interesting to see what Jerome Henderson, how all that plays out. But I think guys would, Jerome Henderson, he would have to get his ducks in a row and get a job, move around pretty quickly. So I think most guys are usually like to stay unless there's Patrick Graham was willing to stay until the Raiders job became open, even though everything was like, why would Patrick Graham want to stay after they just fired his best friend and all that stuff? Okay. All right. That is an episode. We will see you guys, unless the Giants hire a defensive coordinator in the next day or two, which, by the way, you remember, Justin, Joe Shane and Brian Dable were both hired on Fridays.
Please know I'm going to be in Atlantic City the weekend before Mobile.
Okay, well, I was on my way to an Orlando Magic game when Brian Dable was hired, and I stopped and I recorded the podcast at my now fiance's house, like pink walls and everything.
Wow.
So maybe you'll be recording it from a bathroom in Atlantic City.
I guess I have to bring my stuff just in case.
That's an episode. All right, we will see you guys when we in Alabama. Until then, let's go Big Blue.